did we get the payoff or I guess the ending that we wanted? Because like for my bottom line, I thought that War Games match was beautifully done. I thought everything was well executed. I left thinking like, well, what's next after this? But I think they executed that War Games match just perfectly.
Yeah, it's interesting with the OTC, with the Bloodline 2.0 and the original Bloodline. This is something I've learned watching shows and seeing the shows as not as a fan but as an observer. You want to have just enough to be in the next show, and War Games is that just enough. And people forget The Rock is still in the Bloodline story.
Hey, how are y'all doing today? This is the coach Chris Ortiz, and today we're doing like a reverse interview. We're talking to Emmanuel Alejandro on his own podcast, the PGTK Podcast, and this is kind of like a year in review. And this is actually something that I've done on my podcast, and I think it's an excellent idea to kind of have it go the other way. So, Emmanuel, how you doing today?
It's weird being on the other side of doing this. And it's like I've been doing a lot of stuff throughout the year, and so like being on the reverse side is kind of disorienting. And we spoke about it on the pre-production. Like I'm just there to record and facilitate and handing the reins off to you for this recap episode. I can't wait. I can't wait to jump in and see what you have for questions and anything that you'd like to bring up for the year for the podcast.
Yeah, well, what I want to do first is I want to start off with just the podcasting experience in general. Like, what are like 3 things that you have learned about the art of podcasting that maybe you didn't know prior to starting?
The most important one, and I was thinking about it driving home from work this past evening, is burnout is real. And that's probably the most hardest thing that I've learned, is lighting both ends of the candle. It's hard to notice until something had to give. And mine was just a physical toll on my body. And I'm not getting any younger. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, even though I'm in my 30s. I knew where my limits were, and I posted that on the pinned on the Instagram page, where when rest kind of comes into play, if my body starts to say, hey, can you tone it down a bit, that's where it kind of really took a cue for me to just take this time off to focus on that. The second thing is, there's so many people that I got to speak to, different backgrounds, whether they're in the music business, like with Montezi, or all the wrestlers that I've come to have conversations with. Every guest that I have is pretty much like, they have their backgrounds, they have their drive to leave a mark, whether it's in music or in the wrestling business. That was kind of eye-opening for me, because they have their dreams to chase, but to get to that journey takes different routes for them to get there. And the third one, man, third one's probably going to be more on the technical side. This rig that I have takes a long time to get to where it's at, through many iterations. Like even right in front of me, I have like 2 recorders right here just to get like the best interviews and conversations I had. Like the one that I use a lot lately is this tiny little recorder. I've been bringing this instead of bringing my usual recording unit, because it's very bulky. So it's a lot of fine tuning, a lot of technicals that I had to fix. And like, this is where I have in terms of like getting these episodes out week in and week out. So those 3 kind of come into mind, but like, yeah, the one that stood out the most for me is, burnout is very real in podcasting for sure.
Well, what's been the most redeeming part of podcasting? Because obviously there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to have a podcast, so it's a labor of love. What is the redeeming factors? Just give me 1 or 2 of those.
Just for the guests. And that's something that is kind of the main focus on this little podcasting journey that I have. Is I'm just here to hear what their story is and what they do to strive in whatever they're doing in the wrestling business, and hearing different people to see where their journey's at. And like I have like 2 seasons of highlighting wrestling schools, which I'm very fortunate to have with New Texas Pro Wrestling and with Reality of Wrestling. It's not just like the wrestlers, but the entire schools who have this impact in what they're doing in their careers in wrestling. So each of the episodes that I have is just basically just a page in this little book. And you mentioned that when you were a guest for quite a while, is like it's just a little page in this 53-page book that I have in the podcast, and hearing how they're brought up into wrestling, how they want to be the next superstar, whether it's here on the indies or down the line if they do get signed up to a TNA, an AEW, a WWE, and seeing where their journey's at. And like my goal for the podcast too is like if they do take off, if they have this career in WWE, they can find this little page in the podcast, like, oh, okay, I got to see where he started and seeing where he is now. Okay, where did that journey start, or where they're at in their point in their career? So just to have them have the story that they have to share and the exposure that they have, so that if someone big does come and like, oh, he's on this episode of the podcast, and how he or she wants to be part of something big, they can refer to the episode like, okay, I know why he wants to be in the business.
Yeah, it's really neat to be there at the beginning of the journey and watch them, jump through all the hoops, and eventually get to a point to where they're making a living doing what they love, because it's it's a long and arduous journey. Yeah. Now, tell me, what are some of the common threads that you're seeing with these professional wrestlers? Like, what is it that they're seeking? We know that they want to one day like do it for a living, but like, what is the underlying things that you're noticing that they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a good question, because one thing that I notice is they always look up to the big leagues. When they started as a fan, like who are their go-tos, and it's always been WWE. And some of the guests have a match or a moment that they were like, hey, if this guy can do it, why not me? And seeing their journey grow, that kind of sprouts off into different directions, where they have the desire to be in the level of a WWE and figuring out how they want to attain to that. And Texas as a state, it's a wild landscape, because a lot of the wrestling, and maybe I'm missing some states, and I grew up on the East Coast where WWE programming was my go-to when I was a kid. But seeing the Texas wrestling scene and seeing where their desire from that match in a PLE at WWE or an EW pay-per-view, and they're like, hey, I want to do this too. That's when they sprout off, whether they're learning through a different wrestling academy, whether it's an AEPW or or Reality of Wrestling, where they might get a good shot through on the WWE ID program. So out of that desire, that sprouts off into what they want to do in the business, and working their butts off on the indies. So hopefully one day, if they see a scout from those big promotions and saying, hey, all right, you're a prospect at a WWE ID, or if someone from AEW is a scout there and they want to see how they do things in the tryout. So out of that desire, that route sprouts off into different directions, but it kind of goes into that one head of being in the big leagues that way. So it's a very different journey, but the destination has always been the same in what they do things in their wrestling career.
Yeah, and you've been blessed enough to be around a handful of different, wrestling schools and companies. Uh, what have you noticed are similar in these schools, and then what are some things that are unique to these different organizations?
I'll refer to APW because I've had Pops on. I'm fortunate to have him on an interview, and they're very much old school. They're stuck. I won't say they're stuck. They have this regimen that they've done, and Pops' mentor was training since the 60s, and it's that old saying: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because AEPW has had different stars that wind up being in the larger sphere of the wrestling business. Raquel Rodriguez, who was just at Raw when we started recording this last night. She was trained under AEPW. Jordan Grace was trained under AEPW. And Ricky Starks, probably the biggest one out of all of them, came out of AEPW. So the old school mentality of wrestling and how the business is run, that's what's very unique about AEPW. While moving to reality, reality, you got to see what it looks like to be in the big leagues. And every time I go there, in every show that I went to, it's like seeing NXT. And it's the independent developmental brand that they have, because it's Booker T. I mean, the guy has been a commentator, a wrestler for those 30 years, and having the knowledge that Booker has in his time in WWE as a wrestler, but also being a commentator on NXT, that's something that students will pick up right away, because they know the pedigree that's coming out of WWE, and they can learn that from there. And New Texas is kind of a unique scenario where it's a very fertile environment that they have in learning what it takes to be in the wrestling business, and they have their own training style and regimen that they have over there. So it's kind of seeing the different phases of wrestling eras come into those wrestling schools, and seeing, like I said before, they have these different journeys, but their destination is hitting those big leagues for sure.
Yeah, there's multiple routes, right, to get to the places that we want to go.
Exactly.
You've had several conversations this year, with some young and up and coming talent. Mm-hmm. Who is someone that is stuck out to you this year as
okay?
We'll start with this: the most interesting conversation.
The very first in-person interview that I have, and it was a work interview, and it's everyone's in character. Shout out to Lou Cameron, to Tina Nixon, to Mokele. And Lou recently graduated after that episode, but seeing where their heart is and their passion is for the business, and seeing how they're doing things on the indies. And like Lou Cameron has been traveling all over the world. All over the world. I take that back. All across the state. This is all across the country. That's his goal, to be traveling around the world. But for him to go out of his way to go to Mississippi and leaving his mark in that territory, or Mokele has been traveling to Laredo with Laredo and TNX, who's the current AEPW Women's Champion, and how long she's had that title held in the academy for that long time, and seeing them being their character and learning how to mix what reality is and what perception is during that interview made me realize there's a lot of potential for them to go to be in that next level. So that kind of came into mind. Epidemus Jr. is another one. Yes.
Those interviews are very hard to do whenever the guys are in character, aren't they?
No, seriously. If you see the recording, I'm not even joking. There were moments I corpsed. I was trying not to laugh, but like But we're having fun, despite me trying to corpse, and we were having fun learning and promoting. At the time it was the Summer Spectacular. At the time, it was hard, but I got to know them not only with their character but also who they are as people. At the end of that interview.
Yeah. Now, do you find that these characters, are they an extension of who these people really are, or are they like total offshoots and they couldn't be anything? They're not even close to being similar to what the real person is.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I still remember someone saying this from a long time ago. I forgot who it was, but wrestling as a character, it's themselves times 100.
Mhm.
And it's themselves, but they magnify who they really are. So like Luke Cameron is the personification of violence. Tina Nix is the boss lady. Mokele is the Congo demon. It's their personalities times 100, to the point where like you can't tell what's real or not. That's why that interview is such an interesting episode. After watching it, you get to see their true selves, but really get into character, just so that the lines get blurred. The lines get blurred a lot, and you won't know until it hits you. And I'm like, oh, okay, they were characters the whole time. Let me play along with them and see how I do things from there. So it's seeing that magnification of what their personality is. That's what really got me to understand, like, okay, there's other characters that are there as I got to the different interviews I have down the line, and some will have their some will have their in real life personalities, but also they will have those characters that I have to get ready, or else it wouldn't catch me off guard, but rather I have to prepare accordingly whenever they do break into character like that.
Do you think it's absolutely essential that it be them times 10 or times 100 in order for them to make it to the promised land? Or do you think that someone can sprout an alter ego that's really not them? Like, I'll give you a case in point.
Yeah.
I was talking with Rudy Garza, the North Star over there at Reality of Wrestling, and he came over and we had an interview. And man, like, it threw me for a loop, because it was Rudy the Star. It was the entertainer, the performer. But I've met him a couple other times outside, and it's the same damn guy. But he's up to a level 10, 20, 100 of himself. So for me, I think it's probably absolutely essential for you to buy into that character. It has to be an extension of like who you truly are, magnified to a 10. Like, does it happen that maybe you can fake it till you make it and be something that you're not? I think it happens every once in a blue moon, but I think for the most part, for these people to climb the mountaintop and get there, I think it has to be them times 100.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I always remember this. One wrestler I always looked up to as a kid is The Miz. And The Miz is a heel, like times 100. And I was watching this this morning as I'm driving to work, is the Talking Smack segment with Bryan Danielson. Oh, sorry, Daniel Bryan and The Miz and Renee Young at the time. And The Miz really gave into that heel character, and really taunting Daniel Bryan that, hey, this is my champion. This is during his Intercontinental run at the time. And he's like, this is my title. You're going to have to fight for it, for you to take that away from me. And at the end of that segment, and you got to see a little bit of both himself and the character when he started watering, his eyes are starting to water. And I was like, oh, there's the real person behind the character. So it does take the personality, but there will be moments where they will show their true selves, but they were not going to be 100% behind it. But you saw hints of it. That
was a great interview, by the way.
I love it, because that's how I want interviews to be. Is like, you still want to give them the script or the rundown, but you want to get to know them as a person. But remember, this is wrestling. It's, it's everything is fabricated to a degree, but when they have those non-character moments like that talking smack segment, you kind of want to respect the guy after basically having tears in his eyes saying, "This is my championship. I will fight for it to take that away from me."
That he blurred the line definitely
Yes,
on that interview.
exactly.
The line was blurred, and it had you scratching your head like, "Whoa, what did I just see here?"
Exactly.
All right. So we talked about one of your favorite interviews. Talk to me about some stars that you see on the Texas Indies right now that are really starting to catch your eye and that you feel, have the capability, to make the jump, possibly even get that WWID, badge thrown on them.
Ooh. Yeah, there's so much. And if I miss anyone, I apologize. This is basically recency bias at play. And it sucks because if I miss a lot of people at that point, but
Well, let's do this.
man,
Let's do this to keep it,
yeah.
fair and balanced. Let's say like one person from each of your major promotions that you love to follow, because you mentioned 3 at the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's stick to those 3 and let's pick 1 or 2 people from each that you find interesting and has it.
Man. I'd say, man, that's gonna be a
It's a lot
crazy
of
one.
pressure.
Yeah, so much pressure. Honestly, out of Motina and Lou, I think all of them are capable of doing it. It just takes time. Lou Cameron recently graduated from APW not too long ago, but you got to see the stretches of how they do things coming into the big leagues, and to pay their dues, to grind, to know that wrestling takes growth, and growth takes time for them to sprout their wings into something big. So I think all 3 of them are capable of doing it, and there's so much that they can offer, but they have to pay their dues to learn what it means to wrestle in the indies, so that at one point, yeah, let's see, the WWE ID guy comes up like, "Hey, you know, here's the little plaque that says you're in." So I think all 3 of them are capable of doing it, but it takes time, and different routes take different times for them to take off. So I see them down the line, but I can't tell when. But when that moment comes, that's when they'll make it to the ID program if they choose to take that route.
All right. Well, what about New Texas?
Ooh. New Texas, Ode Barra has been, it's kind of an interesting, because that's the very first in character interview I had, and that scared, you get to see the whites in my eyes when he went into character. So Ode has been a good one. Timur has been pretty great. I met him a couple of times in United and also at Inspire. When he's healed up, Dustin Wynn has been such a breakout star before he got his ankle injured a few months ago. So Rachel Rose, High-End, Stephen Wolf. I can throw a list at that point. Cool. So like that's a big list too. And I'm not discounting AEPW because they have their stars to sprout into their own paths into the big leagues. So AEPW has a lot of guys who are there. Primetime Jay Sky, Ethan Hunter, Houston Hendricks. Who else? The ones who are graduated already, like Danny Orion or a CJC or an Ollie Summer. So there's so much multitudes of people that can make it to the top if there's enough time for them to grow into that position when the time comes.
Yeah, part of it's luck too, right? Like you have to be performing at the right time in front of the right person, and have the match of your life, and you're just always like one view away from getting that big call up. So I liked a lot of the people that you just got through talking about. I know these Houston guys a little bit more so than the Central Texas guys, but Man, you name some really, really nice kids. And as someone that's worked with them behind the scenes, they work hard, Manuel. They work
Yep.
really, really, really hard. And when they get put in a place where they can learn new stuff, like they're willing to learn new stuff. So I can tell you, like they're good students. And I think that's
Hmm.
what's going to lead to them being, even better pros, is that they're never through learning. I've been very pleased with their want to, because not everyone wants to learn new stuff, man. I'm a teacher, been teaching 20 years, and not everyone's buying what you're selling. But these kids, they are, man. Especially like the culture over there at New Texas. Those kids they're hungry. I like it.
Yeah.
They're like they see themselves as the underdogs, and it's giving them energy and zeal and vigor, and it's cool to see. What about a reality of wrestling? That's kind of like the
Can we
blue
put
bloods, right?
everyone on?
Like, well, it is.
No, I
You have
tease,
an
I tease, I tease.
you have an opportunity to learn from a WWE Hall of Famer, and then he's got the people that he's brought up, that have made it pretty big, on the indies, on a national and on a state level, and that's a good place to be. You're one phone call away, right? Like, who you liking over there at Reality Wrestling?
Ooh, man. All day. Well, all day definitely is a guy to look out for. He had the pectoral injury, so that kind of hindered his progress to go into that next level. So when he's recovered up, I think will all day something to look out for. Rocket for sure. Rocket has been really, I think he has like 2 years under his belt, but give it time for him to really sprout into something that's really bigger than himself, hitting up into the WWE. But of course, the elephant in the room, I will have to say this, Zilla Fatu. That's probably the elephant in the room with reality of wrestling, and seeing how he's done and seeing the matches that I've watched as a fan, and seeing the trajectory that he has. And of course, he's part of the Anoa'i dynasty in that respect. And of course, even though he has that lineage, he has to work, and he has to really get to know himself as that wrestler to be when he does call up to the WWE ID. So on the women's side, Gigi Ray has been kind of a good person to see growing in the women's division. Promise Braxton has another one. So there's a lot. Like for my personal ones, it'll be like all day. It'll be Rocket. I'll throw in Max Castellanos just because of his character work. It's that one. When he goes full heel, he does not hold back. So there's so much to look forward to with reality wrestling. But honestly, like I mentioned, the elephant in the room is Zilla Fatu, and give him a couple years. Booker fine tuning along with the students that he has trained with, he might hit that WWE ID placard down the line. So that's kind of what reality is for me, for them to see and sprout up into becoming those superstars at the bigger promotions.
Yeah, I agree with you. With the selections you had made, in particular, like Josiah, the Rocket. I've had an opportunity to speak with him on a couple of occasions, and there's some things that really jump out to me. Like, he's kind of like a dark horse, right? Like, we could talk about the obvious, like
Yeah,
Zilla's going to get his opportunity as long as he runs the race. He has to run the race.
right.
He has to finish the race, and he's got a bunch of intangible things going for him. It's almost blatantly obvious at this point, right? Just finish the race, young man, finish the race. You got an amazing story. But, speaking of, like, the Rocket, like, I look at someone like that he's a young man, but he's going to put on another like 20, 30 pounds of muscle. Like, he's not even close to getting filled out. He's got a good frame on him, and he's going to be able to like hold on to that muscle. I would even say, like, if you were to look into the future, like 10 years, like, you're going to see someone that has a physique that is very akin to like Prime Booker,
Right.
and
Right.
they almost have a similar physique. It's just a matter of, just growing and growing, getting comfortable behind the mic. He's a nice kid, and he's very soft spoken from our conversations, and finding who the Rocket truly is and turning it up to level 10, I think, is going to be like that next stage of growth. And I would love to see him, lean into that shoot style that he has. He's got an amateur
Yep.
wrestling background. He's got wonderful kicks. And the shorts that he wears, they look like boxing shorts, and they look like Muay Thai kickboxing.
Yeah, it does.
Shorts.
That's what threw me off a little bit.
Yeah, so I'd love to see him, kind of lean into that shoot style, because he has those tools. So for me, like the dark horse, to be talked about over there at Reality Wrestling would be, The Rock. And I think sky's the limit, no pun intended. Plus, he's a nice kid, but man, there's so much talent over there too, and it's a wrestling factory. They work on their fundamentals. They got good leadership. The people come back home and they want to give back. They have, everything you could want in a facility, a weight room, multiple rings, lighting, camera work. Like it's the place you want to go. If you're an indie star, that's kind of like, let me make the pilgrimage, to League City or Texas City. All right, man. Moving on ahead, what are some promotions that you've kind of kept an eye on that maybe they're small and obscure, but you're like, oh, they're onto something?
Oh, there's plenty, actually. It's funny. Like, the one thing, I mean, just in Austin, and Austin being like, that old
Weird.
slogan of keep Austin weird. There are a couple that I kind of had my eye on. Probably Inspire, APW, all the bigger things that are there. That's one thing. Slam Portal has been very much a it's not really a best kept secret anymore. Slam Portal they have the wrestling, but they have the comedy chops to do it. Slam Portal, I went to one of the shows at Central Machine Works a long time ago, but I got to see the comedy side of wrestling, because oftentimes when we watch wrestling, it's gruff men, two men or two women, or a tag team, or a 6-man or 8-man tag. But Slam Portal has been very much an interesting promotion, because I never saw comedy wrestling as much growing up, and seeing how they run things. And I had a guest on, Oscar Garza, who has a puppet as a wrestler, which is ridiculous. But at the moment when I saw Oscar and raising Pugginhead, that's the puppet that he has, he was doing like the one arm thing, and I'm like, I believe. So like at that point when that match started, and seeing the puppet basically doing lucha moves, and the other wrestlers are playing along with it, and seeing where they're going in the match, and putting Puggin over, or whatever the situation that may be. When I was there, Puggin was over. I was like, okay, Slam Portal has been such a fun promotion to look at. I haven't seen PWR. That's like the offshoot of Slam Portal. So Austin has the comedy. I never watched comedy wrestling until probably recently. Like, even in WWE, like I would have Santino Morello, or R-Truth currently. But like, seeing that comedy wrestling on a local level, that's something that a lot of people miss. And it's free wrestling. Whenever they're on, they'll have some ticketed events, but some of their shows have free admission. So that's another thing to look forward to. From there. And
essentially wrestling is a variety show, right? So there's room for everything.
Exactly.
There's room for seriousness. There's room for blood and gore. There's room for a puppet show. Damian Sandow and The Miz. I mean, for a while they were killing it as Mizdow, and I enjoyed, and I looked forward to that tomfoolery, each and every week. And someone even say Damian Sandow was like the star in that duo. At times, I would even subscribe to that. What about, have you been down to Houston and watched Jaime's Loco Wrestling?
They followed me. They followed me recently, and I'm like, if the time and the stars align, and I'm limited to what time I have during, whether it's this week or the weekends, I have yet to see a Loco show. I did see some on YouTube, but it's different seeing it in person for sure.
Oh, you're missing out, man. Like you need to make time. Now, let me tell you what he does well over there. Like he is able to bring in some top-notch talent from around the country, to go toe to toe with his stars, and he has helped grow some really 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 good talent. You got a Ninja Mac that's done a lot of stuff for him over there, and those
Yeah.
two dudes are solid. Like that's a friendly relationship. It's more than just business with those two. Like they're two guys that genuinely are trying to look out for one another and want what's best for each other, and they bring in some talent to fight these loco stars, man. And I love it. Then they bring in the death matches, which is something that I've
Oh,
only seen a handful of them, but holy
yeah.
shit. Are we talking about like some entertaining, but some stuff that makes you go, oh
Yeah.
no,
Oh
but
my
you're still
God. I'll
looking,
let you finish. Good.
but you're still looking out like your eye like that because you can't believe what just happened. And it I think he's on to something over there, So I want to continue to see Jaime, grow with Loco as well.
Because it's interesting because that's the thing. That's my boundary is death matches. Um, there's a Halloween horror show at APW, and the blood was there, and I literally had to wince and look away, and I'm like, yeah, I heard a thud. Just look over there. So like deathmatch. I mean, it's someone else's cup of tea. I would do it, and recently they have the deathmatch promo. Is it a funeral for the family? I think that was what it's called. I have to look it up, so I'll have to add that on the editor's notes. But they have just like a deathmatch tournament, and my immediate thing is nope. I mean, there's of course it's safe in the parameters of like what a death match should be, but it's not for me, and that's kind of a thin line for me. So tables, ladders, and chairs, I'm okay with, but there's blood or if someone gets busted open, it's like some other time.
Well, it's like
It's weird.
watching a movie, right?
I have Dimitri's shirt. I'm supporting him whenever I can, but it's like death match. I'll do my best to not, hurl somewhere and during a match. So
Well, it's like watching a movie. Like we'll watch adults, get killed in a movie, but the moment they kill a dog or they kill, a kid, and we're like, oh, that's totally off limits, So it's a strange juxtaposition. Um, the wrestling business, man, I'm curious because I'm getting up there in age, and I'm still a huge fan. Do you
mhm.
see yourself like getting into the biz? You know, not as a podcaster, but like getting into the biz as maybe a manager or maybe an
Ooh.
interviewer or maybe somewhere like in commentary. Because look, I'm gonna be honest with you. When I stop coaching in a couple of years, like you're gonna see me over there at New Texas, or you're gonna see me over there at Reality Wrestling enrolling in wrestling school, and I'm gonna make a run. As a manager. What about you?
Um, honestly, to do in rings, I mean, I have no physicality, so wrestler is definitely out the window. I am the most fragile person in my age. One hit, I'm probably going to be knocked out for good. But in terms of working in the business, I'm still dabbling into the interviewer spot. Um, Working backstage, working on production because I have the privilege of working at APW, working on the production side. I got to see a sneak peek in what production's like in the business. And I'm like, someday I want to be in that position of working in the backstage or in production. But honestly, my my forte has been with interviews. So if I do have interviewer spots, you're more than welcome to let me know whatever promotions that may be, and to craft the story with what they need to do in their storylines. Like, how can I facilitate that to really hype up the match or to make the match more exciting on just words alone before, because the ring is one thing. The
Yeah.
in-ring action is one thing. People will have enjoyment seeing people duke it out in the ring, whatever that match stipulation may be. But the promo work is really what grounds what that match is, and setting up the stories. And my entire podcast has been storytelling, and how can I create the story to elevate themselves up, whether we're promoting a show or promoting a match that they're in. What can I do with the word play that I can give to these guys? How can I hype them up at that moment in time? And managers, I there is a special place on that, but I can't be a heel. I am a natural face throughout my entire life. So turning heel is going to be, I would say, it's off limits. I mean, if the situation calls for it, sure, but I am a natural face, just because of how I'm reared into real life. So like, manager definitely out the window, but to be an interviewer and doing sit downs like this is something that I can excel in, because I can share the story with the questions that I give to these guys and how they answer them, and how it relates to bringing excitement into whatever show that they're in at that point.
Yeah, well, hey, if Hulk Hogan could turn heel, Manuel Alejandro could definitely turn heel. Never say never.
Yeah, no, I mean, nothing wrong with it. Just, I think it'll take some time for me to adjust, because it is a character. And I mentioned it, it's my personality times 100. What's that 100% of that, my personality now? What's that going to be? So it takes time for me to become that man. I mean, you never know. I mean, I could be the Paul Heyman of Texas for all I know. So that's a tall order when that happens. The wise man.
Yeah, well, hey, like I made it, man. Like, think about it. Like, there's got to be an angle. Has anyone hit an angle as a podcast host, right? And you just, fire each guy up, and maybe you can be an antagonist on both ends. Like, oh, did you hear what he said about you?
Okay,
Did you hear what he said about you?
That's good.
And you just go around stirring the fucking pot, starting shit. The next thing you know, there's a feud on your show. And now on your show, you're broadcasting it and you're sharing the story with everybody.
Ooh.
So APW out there in Central Texas, hey, y'all have something with Emmanuel out there. I would utilize that. That is a tool that you have in the toolbox.
Let me get my notes.
For sure, because it really goes back to
that's attainable.
Yeah, and it's not being done yet. It's not being done yet.
So that's something to look to. It's something to look to. So, but right now, it's always been having these conversations like what we're doing now, and seeing how I can offer to elevate themselves down the line in their career. That's always been my specialty, is how to make those words into elevating these guys down the line when I do have these conversations with them. So manager will be close, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah. So what are you looking for in 2025? Because we're closing closing the door on 24 in a couple of weeks, and we're about to creep into 2025. Like, what is like a checklist, sort of like 3 to 5 things that you want to get accomplished in the year 2025 with the show and just in general with you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely touring more cities. Wow, touring more cities, and I'm fortunate enough to have coverage here. We're in my home base in Austin, and doing coverage in Houston with New Texas and with Reality. I've done South with San Antonio. I'm kind of thankful for United 210 for them giving me the platform to do a lot of the interviews there. I went all the way south to Corpus Christi with the Texas Wrestling Cartel. So I'm thankful for them to giving me the opportunity to have interviews with ex-WWE guys or ex-AEW guys to be in that platform. So I'm thankful for them to have this opportunity for me to go. But I haven't done North. I haven't done West. And that leads to the next thing is touring those cities. And El Paso has been kind of I have a soft spot for Eddie Guerrero. And what better way to understand how his career is than to be in El Paso? And that'll take some time because it's an 8-hour drive. It's all the way in West Texas, but to tour El Paso, to tour Dallas. I haven't done a lot because a lot of the Dallas wrestlers wind up going here, so I got to talk to them in my home turf. But to go up north in Dallas is something that I'm really looking forward to coming into the next year, and probably get more bigger guests. And the support that I've gotten throughout the year has been very tremendous, because without the guests that I have this year, I wouldn't have been able to get bigger guests, or to have something like an All Caribbean Wrestling who is doing their shows in the islands, in this case in the Bahamas, and to have a WWE legend in Mark Henry. So the bigger the guest has been kind of a big checkpoint for this year. And down the line, I mean, I can go out of state. Like, it's funny how most of the wrestlers that I speak with, they're like, oh, I'm gonna be in so and so state, or I will be in so and so state, or I've wrestled in middle of the town USA. Like, to go out into the larger states that I haven't been to, that's been a goal too. So and I guess lastly, just a rebrand. I'm gonna break that up too. The podcast is going through a big shift in rebranding. Just the aesthetics, because I've had this logo for about a year or so, to just make the podcast a bit more polished. And that's why I took this time off to work on that rebrand and to make the podcast stand out in the sea of podcasts that we have here on the internet and on the interwebs and on Spotify and streaming. So to rebrand is to just set myself apart from all the other podcasts, and the podcast logo, it's burnt orange, because this podcast will be in Austin, it will stay in Austin, it will have the roots of Austin. That's why it kind of stood apart, because no one really does burnt orange apart from UT Sports from that point. So to really rebrand, but keeping the DNA of this podcast being here in Austin, that's probably a big thing coming into next year.
Oh yeah, and Austin is kind of turned into like the center of the United States in a number of different regards.
Yeah,
for college athletics, for combat sports. If you're in Austin and you're doing some indie wrestling, like, you're in a pretty good spot. Like, the grass is not going to be greener somewhere else. Like, water the grass where you're at, because everybody is trying to get to Austin right now. And go ahead and make your mark now. Buy a lot of stock right now, quote unquote, while it's a little bit cheap, because you give it another year or two and it's going to be heck or hell to get into that Austin wrestling scene. It's going to get flooded. It's going to get crowded. It's just like everything else. Everyone's coming to Texas.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I had this conversation with basically a mentor that I have, who's a producer, and it's my cousin. And there were moments where I really wanted to really just try somewhere else in terms of podcasting, but my cousin's like, no, you're prime to really reach out, because Austin has been, and it's pretty much every city, major city here in Texas, you get to see the transplants coming in and seeing where the wrestling scene is at, and seeing how big the city is, and figuring out, okay, and just finding out how big the scene is in Texas. Because, like, Austin has been just a hub city, because, like, a lot of the wrestlers who are, whether it's in El Paso or in Dallas or in Houston or in San Antonio or Corpus, you got to see Austin has become an anchor point, but also Austin can become an anchor point to those cities. And, we get to see, like, the likes of Danny Orion winding up in New Texas. And we're seeing like a Nastico, who's Nastico, or Eddie Martinez, who is Nastico's thing from Dallas, and then Eddie Martinez is in Corpus. They wind up having an anchor point with United 210. So there's a lot of stuff to go around in Texas, and it's not just like the wrestling scene, but like everywhere. Like next year, they're proposing a city of Austin being a baseball city, which doesn't make sense, but that we'll save that for another time.
Yeah, switching gears to the grandest stage of them all, like WWE. How do you think that the Bloodline feud at Survivor Series, did we get the payoff or I guess the ending that we wanted? Because like for my bottom line, I thought that War Games match was beautifully done. I thought everything was well executed. I left thinking like, well, what's next after this? But I think they executed that War Games match just perfectly.
Yeah, it's interesting with the OTC, with the Bloodline 2.0 and the original Bloodline. This is something I've learned watching shows and seeing the shows as not as a fan, but as an observer. You want to have just enough to be in the next show. And War Games is that just enough. And people forget The Rock is still in the bloodline story. So it's just teasing and teasing and teasing. And we're seeing these off splinter stories out of the bloodline. Like I think it was Raw last night, we got to see Sami Zayn go one-on-one with Seth Rollins, or CM Punk basically just being passive aggressive to Seth Rollins, which is really, I think it was just like what CM Punk's truth is. That's, it could be passive or whatever the interpretation that may be, but each of those offshoot storylines from War Games, if Triple H does his cards right, the main event for 41, since the story was already done, we're waiting for Rock and Roman, and people are satisfied seeing the story and seeing Cody Rhodes become the undisputed WWE champion. Now we get to see what the real story is about, and that's Rock and Roman. So what they did in War Games is just a teaser for what's going to happen next year come Mania time.
Yeah, and I'm going to call my shot. I think we're going to see Jey Uso win the WWE, World Championship. I think he's going to take it off Cody's shoulders. I think I'm not a fortune teller or anything, but I kind of feel like this is all being built to pass the torch to him. And hey, man, like the people love him. Like he has made a connection with the fans, with the Yeet. The clothing. He's got some major Macho Man, Randy Savage vibes going right now.
Oh yeah,
and he's main event. And his in-ring stuff it's first class.
Yep.
So I'm looking at Jey Uso potentially being, next up after Cody Rhodes. And I think this is something that's been building since I want to say day one, but day one. But I could see this being the big payoff, like Jey Uso coming out, as the tribal chief whenever it's all over, said and done. Because Roman's had his battles with leukemia. Like he's a human being and he's tired, and I know he loves entertaining, but this takes a toll on the body, the mind, the psyche.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder, like, how long can they keep doing this? And is it best for business, to kind of like slowly fade away and then let your family, continue the greatness that they've been known for, for decades.
It's a generational thing too, where we got to see the Rikishis, you got to see the Wild Samoans, you got to see Yokozuna, you got to see all these dynasties really go into prominence. But of course, it's a season, and every season will have its changes. And I think, especially with Roman and what he's going through, it'll be a while for him to hang up the boots down the line. And
of course,
I think what 41's gonna, if they do have this Rock Roman match in WrestleMania 41, let's see how Roman will fare now that, whatever the outcome may be, whether the original tribal chief finally beating the final boss or vice versa. It's up to Roman to really say, "Hey, I want to hang it up and do it, and hang it up and call it a career." But at the same time, I think there will be a power vacuum that's going to be filled, and I think it does go to main event Jey Uso's really taking the reins from that bloodline, and Jacob Fatu's there, and give it a
What
couple
a
years.
monster! What a
I saw him at
monster!
Reality, dude. I remember seeing the match that he faced with Edge Stone. He did a freaking he did a moonsault, and he's a big guy. He's a huge guy, and I'm like, he did a moon. He's that athletic, but to have that, and you get to see what's next, and give it a couple years, Zillow will be up there. So Roman's in good hands if he does part ways and really ride into the sunset down the line. But I think if the Rock Roman match is going to happen at 41, that's going to be the hinging point to where Roman is going to be in the future when that happens.
Yeah. Well, here's the good thing about Roman is like he doesn't need the belt, to be relevant. Like he brought relevance to the belt. It's not the belt that brought relevance to him. So he's kind of like the Undertaker, where he's always going to be a spectacle. He's always going to be, at the top of the marquee with or without the belt. He's in a special category that only a few have been able to get to, and you're right with Jacob. I totally forgot, but that guy is a monster. Nobody moves
Tonga
like him.
Tonga and Tongaloa and Tonga and Tamaloa, like those guys. I mean, that's Haku's line too. So you get to see like the different families really form into what the future is going to look like in WWE down that line. So if Roman does hang it up down the line, he's in good hands and who's going to be picking up the mantle when that happens, when he does want to ride into the sunset.
Yeah, well, I can't wait till they let old Jacob pick up the mic, because like he can spit on the mic too. That's like another layer that they haven't even like peeled off the onion yet. Like when they give him the mic, oh shit, y'all better watch out, man. Well, hey, we're getting to the end of the podcast. Just talk to me, man. Like, is there any shout outs that you'd like to make, people that have helped you get to where you're at? Maybe people that you want to talk to in the future, just kind of like throwing Hail Marys out there.
That's a good one. Man, there's so much people I want to thank too. Honestly, all the guests that I've had for the past 50 episodes, whether it's from an archived episode I got from a couple years ago to now with Zeke Rose, and I want to say thanks to all of them, and each of their stories has really imprinted me in a way that when I do see them in the ring, or if we talk sports, like the very first guest I had was a fellow Met fan. Like I got to know them in a different light. So if I do see like a Zeke Rose or a Zeke Rose or the or a Calientita or a Hit, like the past 3 episodes that I had with them. Oh, and Jay Sky, who was episode 50. The more I see them in the ring, I got to see them in a different light. And I want to say thanks to them, because now I understand them, that when they do go in the ring, I know the grind that each of these guests go through. I appreciate them for what they're doing, because I am not that physical to start with. But and I want to thank all of the schools that I have and that I talk to in Crash Course. Like I never got to understand wrestling schools without going to an APW or a Reality of Wrestling or a New Texas. Like no one really talks about the wrestling schools in podcasts lately, and hopefully I can be the torchbearer to other schools who would like to know how they run things, because we wouldn't have a Seth Rollins without without being trained under Dusty Rhodes, or we wouldn't have a Brian Keith without him going through reality, going through Texas All-Star Wrestling, going through reality of wrestling and where he is now. He's all elite. So like to have these schools, I want to show my gratitude because I want to know how things are in the wrestling business on the school side. And I am a student at heart and I'm still learning how things are going to be. And finally, not last but not the least, I want to give it up to God because, like, honestly, the past 53 episodes have been very hard, but having a little faith does help along the way because if I hadn't take that step, if I hadn't done all these things, God is still in the foresight of what I'm doing, and the opportunities have been coming in ever since. But at the same time, God does give limits. He gives us rest. God did create rest in a day after all of the world has been built. So having that period of rest kind of gives me a bit of a bit of a relief to that. So just want to think through those three. So next year, when January rolls around, recording again, hopefully I'll hit the ground running again come next year.
Sounds like a plan. Hey, well, thank you for allowing me to hit this reverse podcast. I wish you the best of luck. It's a lot of people start, but not a lot of people, keep running the race, so continue to run the race and, just keep beating those odds and do it because it makes you happy. Don't worry about, viewership. Don't worry about numbers. Don't worry about likes. More importantly than any of those are you genuinely enjoying yourself? And does this make you happy? And as long as you can answer yes to both of those questions, keep doing what you're doing, homie.
Yeah. And I want to thank you two for hosting because it was interesting when we had this conversation when you were a guest and we talked about how you're doing things in the combat sports world, especially with what you're doing in jiu-jitsu in public schools. And like I mentioned, like wrestling, no one talks about wrestling schools on a podcast. No one's mentioned combat sports in a public school setting. And you're kind of really blazing the trail and being a pioneer in doing that. Of course, it won't be easy. It won't be a perfect road, but you got to have progress and learning the ins and outs of bringing programs like jiu-jitsu in public schools. So I want to give you your flowers on that because that's something that no one's really heard of in the school system. So wanted to say thank you.
Man, it is much needed, and you're right. Like it's not talked about a lot. It's not a very popular idea out of ignorance. With that being said, let me tell you this, and this is the power of podcasting, and this would be a good way, to kind of end the story, is that before I brought, the fight to the public, like people were able to dismiss me very quietly and not answer emails and ghost, and since I've been taking the fight to social media and making videos and trying to create arguments for why it needs to be done, like I've actually gotten into rooms, and doors have opened up a little bit. And I've found out through conversations and DMs that there's a lot of people that want to see this happen, So I appreciate it, man. Maybe we'll come back and we'll talk about that, in January, February, something like
that. Of course.
All righty, man. Well, hey, best of luck. Get your rest. 2025 is going to be a big year. And man, I wish the best for you.
All right. Thanks for having me.